Hi all, I hope some of you enjoyed Judit Polgar's win earlier that I showed. Also checking back, in fact she's also beaten the legendary Garry Kasparov in the very same opening. Now someone asked me why would I discourage such an opening as the Berlin Wall. Well, it was used by Kramnik to defeat Kasparov in the Brain Games match, which I'd witnessed actually firsthand some of the games. And, you know, for some players it is discouraging them to play 1e4. Anyway, so let's have a look at that earlier encounter in 2002, which actually made news at the time. Apparently it was in ABC CBN News, something like a Hungarian Wonder Woman. Judit Polgar outsmarted the world #1 Garry Kasparov in the 5th round of the Russia versus rest of the world team match in Moscow. So her sensational first ever win against Kasparov helped the world retain a slim lead as the Russians, powered by the wins of teenager Alexander Grischuk, Alexander Morozevich and Peter Svidler, clawed their way back to a point behind their rivals, 25.5 to 24.5. She did it with white in a positional Roy Lopez in which she outplayed Kasparov after he opted for the Berlin defence, the same system which number 2 Vladimir Kramnik beat him in their unofficial world title fight in London 2 years ago. So that was an ABC News story hitting the news. So let's check out that game as well, just to reinforce an understanding of the Berlin system. So for me, it was a bit tragic for Kasparov to go out like that against Kramnik. You know, in the unofficial match, it's sort of disheartening, really, that Kasparov didn't vary. So here, okay, in 2002 though, so Judit was only 2.681. When I say only, because Kasparov was 2.838. So E5 from Kasparov. So this early knight F6, no A6, just knight F6, hitting the E pawn, and white accepts that E pawn loss for D4. Now we have knight D6. So black is tempting this queen exchange, which will leave black with the bishop pair, but will have doubled pawns. So bishop takes e6, doubling the pawns but losing the bishop pair. Now the king in the centre as well looks as though, you know, black might be at a significant disadvantage. Two factors: the king in the centre and the double pawns, but compensating are, you know, the bishop pair and a relatively solid position. And also sometimes this bishop can be a bit of a problem as well, I guess. If it's put on the, you know, the diagonal, e5 is blocking it. If this pawn is easily blockadable via e6, then, you know, there might be some lack of harmony. But let's see how Judit played this. Similar actually to the game we looked at earlier, knight c3. Maybe this is a pet system. So she's recognising the importance in both of these games of the e4 square for the knight, just to put pressure on black's dark squares. You know, like these squares, the knight on e4 is quite good there. So h6 was opted by Kasparov. Now this h6, in contrast to h5, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, one clear disadvantage is white's free for g4. Now another potential disadvantage of h6 is if white can use the f5 square later, then it will be trickier to play g6, because if you imagine a knight here for white, then that knight will be hitting h6. So we have this idea that maybe, you know, the f5 knight and that square overall can be hijacked here by white. But first Judit throws in a check. Now h3. So black doesn't want to waste time playing h5. His whole idea of h6, the advantage was so white couldn't use the g5 square, which means, you know, bishop e7, there's no concern about the exchange of the dark square bishops, which might mean later, you know, things on the dark squares like pawns over here are not going to be a problem if black wants to play b6. So h6 has got some advantages over h5 if we contrast the two games. So bishop e7, and now knight e2. Very interesting. No b3, just knight e2. So where is this knight heading? Well, one point actually of bishop e7 was also to facilitate, as evidenced by the game, knight h4, to trade off a little bit, simplify. And now bishop e3. So pointing at the queen side, strengthening the grip on the dark squares here, connecting rooks. Okay, bishop f5. What can be done about c2? Passively protect it with a rook? No, Judit, she plays knight d4. We start to get a hint that f5 might be useful to white in this position. But bishop h7 at the moment it seems secure. Black's position seems secure. Although maybe in the bishop over there it's not guarding the queenside squares as much now. g4, highlighting f5. Now really as a target. So knight f5, and if g6 there'll be knight takes h6. So f5 is a good square. Bishop e7. And now king g2. So this is an interesting move. Bringing the king a little bit up. So maybe any potential moves like h5 are easier to parry later with rook h1. What else does king g2 do? It's quite interesting. I think we'll have to wait for the evidence of the game. But actually, immediately now, black does actually use h5. And now white uses that f5 square, knight f5. So this knight on f5, black doesn't want to give up the bishop pair too easily. Kasparov plays bishop f8. And now all is revealed. The king actually goes aggressively to f3. Wow. Bishop g6. Now rook d2. So Kasparov is just looking at white, building up pressure on the d file here now. With bishop e7 being harder to play now because of knight takes e7. So the knight's not only attractive looking on f5, it's helping in this sort of coordinated pressure down the d file. hg4 check. Is there a bit of counterplay? King g2, rook h7. King moves back now to g3. Next Kasparov elects for f6. So that advanced pawn looks a bit of a shame for it to be traded off. But if it is traded off, white can sometimes get pressure on c7 in this line. So bishop f4. Now Kasparov gives up the light square bishop and then takes on e5. So rook e1. No immediate recapture here. After fe doesn't Judit doesn't play bishop takes e5. She plays rook e1. Okay. See, maybe it's better to take with the rook to be able to double rooks, using that e5 square to double rooks behind, with rook e2. So a little finesse there. Bishop d6. And now after bishop takes e5, what has white gained exactly, apart from double pawns on this side to compensate for black's double pawns over here? The rooks. I think it's the quality of the rooks. They're higher quality than Kasparov's rooks here, slightly more active. King d7. And now this moves c4, which has a serious threat, c5 winning a piece, which is parried by c5. And now, again, Judit shows this great creativity of undoubling black's pawns on the queen side. Bishop takes d6. The key is, again, in exploitable weaknesses. But here it's readily apparent that d6 is going to drop in this variation after rook e6. How is black protecting the d6 pawn? Black has to drum up counterplay on the queen side. He just plays rook h8, allowing his d pawn to drop. But now his c pawn comes under fire. So immense pressure now in the position. Check, quite a few checks. Okay. b6, finally protecting c5. But now it's white's turn to throw in some checks. Check. And now rook d7. The rooks are coming to coordinate on the 7th rank. Capablanca will be proud, as well as pawns to target, and the king is also restricted in its movement. Look at white's king, much more active, aggressive. Rook h2, and now king e3 defending f2 for the moment. Rook f8, and now the rooks have time to double on that 7th rank, offering f5. Check, check, and now here rook takes g7, taking time out to get another pawn. Now this pawn's immune because of rook g8 mating. Kasparov plays king c8 and actually seems to have resigned on his move here. He's giving up in this position. Let's add an engine a bit. So I assume rook takes a7 and the position starts to be quite miserable. But let's just make sure. Rook takes a7 is given as the strongest move, so we'll be threatening rook a8 mate. Say king b8, rook gb7, and now rook c7. Where are these checks going? Okay, there's a move coming up here, a key move, apparently f4, and now offering b2, check, check. And in this position, rook e7 is given us quite strong, rook h7, or rook g7. So say rook h7, there's a threat of mating again. The other rook can come now a threat of mating again, so rook is driven back. And in this position, this becomes critical now for black, according to this engine analysis, with f5. So you can imagine f6, f7 and g8 is going to be crushing. And in this position Kasparov seems helpless. So say b5. There can be rook b7 check here. But I suspect f6 is also winning. f6 is actually given as the strongest move here. f6. And now actually the way to do this is rook e7, even more powerful than f7. To give the option of f7. Oh, Skype toolbar. Option of f7 and rook e8. So after king e8, f7. This is going to be winning a rook, I expect, very shortly. Takes, and now I think rook g7 is just winning. I think that rook g7 will be a clear win here. Or am I mistaken? It's not been given. That is still with white advantage, but apparently black can be run out of moves here, or these pawns can be mopped up anyway. Well, rook g7, this pawn can be mopped up, and now it starts to be dead easy to win. So that's quite far from the final position of the resignation. But it shows, I just wanted to demonstrate why that was actually winning with the two rooks on the 7th here. So just to make sure, so a key move would have been f4, offering b2 perhaps, and then using that f pawn with decisive effect. So let's have a look at that game again in overview and summary. So how to beat this dreaded Berlin defense. Okay, ultra solid knight f6, the bane of the e4 player who wants exciting chess. This sort of thing pioneered by Kramnik when he toppled Kasparov with multiple draws as black. So knight d6, offering queen exchange. So black has the two bishops, the double pawns. So what to do about this dreaded system? Is Judit showing us a way forward now? We've had two fantastic wins in her career. So this one against Kasparov, knight c3 as a system, just to get into that e4 square sometimes. Not immediately though, there's no immediate need to play knight e4, just h3, so that knight's going to be kicked. But also dual purpose for sealing that f5 for a later knight outpost on f5, which is annoying to the black bishop pair. So g4, annoying to the black bishop pair, but combined with this king g2 idea, just in case the h file is going to be dangerous. Okay, so king f3. There's some counterplay to deal with on the h file. There's bishop f4. This f6 trading the pawns gives white potential access, I guess, to black's pawns. After bishop d6, now a pawn is starting to be in grave danger here. After c4 and bishop takes d6, white is forcibly winning a pawn. So the active rooks, as we've seen in many games recently, can be the product of white's initiative, which can lead to a decisive win anyway, even when simplification occurs. Just more active rooks. But it's instructive, I think, in how, in the final position when Kasparov resigned, actually. How the rooks, okay, they're on the 7th, but how do you actually win it? So this threat of like mating black in this type position, but then f4 to make sure that black rooks are not coordinating for a draw by perpetual. So that might be a key move. And then again creating this mating threat with the rooks over here is quite interesting. This is just the variation. So both rooks are threatening for mowing down the black king, driving a rook back, and then using the pass pawn to again create that threat, even though there's a rook on the first row here. The pawn, once it gets to f7, is going to be a menace for the e8 checking square. So I think that's kind of instructive, actually. And now all white needs to do in this position is just mop up these two pawns, and then come for the king to play rook g7 later, rook g8, something like this. Okay, this might be a theoretical continuation, just mopping up a pawn or two, and then using the a pawn as well as a further distraction, just to get the king to f6. So that'll be winning. So I hope you enjoyed that game as well. I think let's make it a Judit Polgar day, shall we? Let's look at the controversy game in the Sicilian next. But let's take one game at a time. There was a controversy take-back game which might be interesting to check out. But I hope you enjoyed this one for the moment. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.